Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Goddard, Director of the Institute for Advanced Study. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to this public lecture. There will be an opportunity for lots of questions at the end of the lecture, and after that, there's a reception to which you're all invited in the Ford Hall Common Room. Today, our speaker is Charles Simonyi. He is President, CEO, and indeed founder of Intentional Software Corporation. Dr. Simonyi has been a trustee of the Institute since 1997, and he's currently president of the corporation of the Institute. He will become chairman of the Board of Trustees in just 1 year's time. Dr. Simonyi was born in Budapest. Early interests included, among many other things, computers and space exploration. In 1966, when he was about 18, he went to work in a computer company in Denmark, moving in 1986 to Berkeley, California, to take his bachelor's degree, and then on to Stanford for graduate study in computer science, obtaining his PhD in 1977. In the meantime, he'd been recruited to work at Xerox PARC, where he developed the first WYSIWYG document production system. That's what you see is what you get, as I'm sure you know. In 1981, he joined Microsoft, where he led the development of programs nearly all of us use all the time. Microsoft Word and Excel, for example. Charles Simonyi has been an outstanding supporter of the Institute and its mission. As chair of our Academic Affairs Committee, he deploys a deep understanding of the whole range of the Institute's activities that is unsurpassed. As a benefactor, he has made donations to support the work of the Institute that are unequaled since the founding of the Institute. In addition to all this and much else, Charles has been into space. And now I have much pleasure in inviting him to share with us his experiences in fulfilling one of his life's ambitions. Charles Simonyi.
Thank you, Peter, for the kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here in this wonderful lecture hall, the Wolfenson Hall. I've been many times in the audience listening to distinguished scholars discuss the mysteries of human history or the mysteries of the universe. This is not going to be a lecture like that. I'm going to discuss a trip I took this spring. And the trip was 14 days in space, 90 minutes around the Earth, 16 times a day, going at 17,500 miles an hour, and you do the math. Orbital spaceflight is still a very rare event. It's, to date, less than 500 people had the privilege of going to orbit and seeing the Earth from the outside. And I think that with this privilege comes an obligation to share the experience. And I hope that's what I can do today. Space tourism is particularly exciting, I think, because it brings a new kind of people into space. And specifically, it increases the diversity of the people who visit space. And specifically, I'm talking about people who don't have the right stuff. people like, if I may say so, you and me. And I think that these people bring back a different perspective. It's a perspective that is more, maybe a little bit more experience-oriented and less task-oriented. So I hope that this sort of perspective will be new for you and useful. I'd like to start by showing a 3-minute video that is kind of encapsulates the experience, and before we go into more detail. And for the rest of the talk, I'd like to encourage, if people have specific questions that relate to a particular image that we are discussing, please ask that question right then and there. Otherwise, hold that thought and ask the question at the end. We'll have plenty of time. I think that the question period is probably one of the most interesting parts of the talk. So let's see the video. Well, I think that my flight is just a small step. I'd really like to involve kids in space sciences. I always thought that training was a very important part of the total experience.
Good day from the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov outside Moscow. This is live coverage of the launch of the Expedition 15 crew and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi to the International Space Station. A Russian Soyuz rocket stands ready to blast off at 12:31 p.m. Central Time. And liftoff of the Soyuz rocket transporting new residents to the International Space Station. Docking confirmed a perfect arrival for new residents to the International Space Station and an American businessman.
When we arrive, we simply open the hatch and we float out of the spacecraft into the space station.
This is Charles Simonyi, and we just arrived, and I am just blown away.
Yes, Charles, I see you on the video monitor, and congratulations on a dream come true. Welcome to ISS.
This is an illustration of the advantages of weightlessness. The easiest way to get around is by flying. Use both of your hands and you can fly very straight.
Thank you very much for the hospitality. I enjoyed working here and working with the excellent crew and commander. It's a bittersweet moment for all of us. We are very sad leaving the station.
The transfer hatch is
Successful landing of the Soyuz TMA-9 spacecraft containing Mikhail Turin, Mike Lopez Alegria, and Charles Simonyi on the steppes of Kazakhstan.
Good to be back. Good to be back on Earth. Fantastic.
So that was the fun part, and we shall look at what happened in a little bit more detail now. And to follow the template of the lectures that are typically given here, I should start with a brief history of spaceflight. Because space age started, or human spaceflight started in April 12th, 1961, where Yuri Gagarin was launched into orbit and was safely recovered. Later in '61, there was an important announcement by President Kennedy, and we return to that in the next slide, committing the nation to landing a man on the moon before the decade is out. And this happened in 1969, July. Armstrong and Aldrin stepped foot on the moon. Since then, a lot of things happened, but I think that probably the most important next date, kind of a change, real change in the year 2000, November. That's when the International Space Station was occupied. And since then, we had permanent human presence in space. It didn't take very long, after 2 years, for a tourist to use the opportunities that were created by the space station. Of course, the space station is somewhere, it's almost like a hotel, you can stay there. There are regular supply ships that goes to the space station, and we'll discuss why that is necessary. Not just supply, but supply ships and lifeboats. And there is an extra seat on those lifeboats called the taxi seat. So the Russians had the incredible, foresight, courage, gumption to sell that ticket and that taxi seat and raise funds for their space program. That was quite significant. So this brings us to a question of why fly humans in space at all. And this is a list. I'm not sure if it's a partial list or a full list. It's kind of a smorgasbord of reasons that people at one point or another been using to justify humans in space. You see some of them with a question mark. That's just my personal opinion, that those reasons are questionable. The other ones are very difficult to oppose. And the first one of those is political vision. And I have to say that President Kennedy's reasoning about putting men in space, in particular to the moon, was probably the best enunciation of why to do this. And of course, everybody knows about the before the decade is out speech. There was no reason given at that time, but 1 year later at Rice University, President Kennedy said, "We chose to go to the moon and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." And people are familiar with that quote, but then he gets to the crux of the matter. I think that the punchline is that this goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. So this is exercising the best of our energies and skills, I think was a very important goal and a task to do, and it was accomplished in the 60s. Unfortunately, cannot be used again. That was correct for visionary, really, for that period of time. And now we have other ways of measuring the best of our energies and skills. The science, you notice that I question mark the science point. And the reason for that is we are talking about manned spaceflight. Space is, of course, incredibly important for science. And the Hubble telescope, for example, that was so ably supported by John Bacall, for example, the professor at the Institute, it returns immense value to humanity. And so science, we are not talking about science, we are talking about the use of manned spaceflight for the purposes of science. Now, mind you, there's a lot of good science that is being done in space on manned spaceflight, but it all has to do with humans being in space and studying that. And that, to me, is kind of a self-referential argument. You still have to have a primary reason to send humans. Otherwise, it would be immoral, unethical to experiment with humans just to see if you put them into weightless environment and expose them to radiation for a long time and see what happens, just to see how the body responds. That's not why we are doing it. Therefore, there must be some other reason to do that. And so anyway, that's the smorgasbord from which, for example, tourists have to choose. And these were my reasons that when it came to the point where I had to decide to fly or not fly. And the first is, of course, that I'm fascinated by space, and I think that many people, I don't know about most people, I'm not sure about most people, but many people are fascinated by space. If it weren't for the cost, and maybe if it weren't for the dangers, perceived dangers, I don't think they are real dangers, then I think many people would like to fly in space, and I'm sure many people that are here today would like to do that. The second reason is, my reason was to support space. It's amazing, but the idea of private space and just space in general, it's financing is not an easy problem for the agencies, especially for the Russian agency. Even for the, you may not believe this, but even NASA at some point opposed tourists, but later welcomed the tourists because there was a hiatus where NASA was depending on Russian spacecraft for services, for example, lifeboat services, and also to take astronauts to the space station services. At the same time, their hands were tied because, for example, the Iran proliferation law that created difficulties in buying the services directly from the Russians. So the Russians were severely undercapitalized, and we'll see some examples of that. So it wasn't that the income from tourism is a significant factor, or has been at least for a period of time. I think that now with the picture is probably changing rapidly, but at that time that was a significant factor. There's a health challenge, just like there was a challenge for the nation to do better during the 60s. I think there is a challenge for the individual to see whether my health is up to a given par. I think it was an interesting benefit of this trip. And I love to learn about the details, and you will see that these are details that you never see in books of how many little superstitions are there. Are they really doing those superstitious things, and do people believe in those superstitions, or what do they do all day? Have you ever wondered? And you can read all the books you want, and you won't find it out. So I wanted to really learn about the details. And finally, popularize science. People are fascinated by space. Kids are very fascinated by space. When you discuss a space flight, you have to talk in terms of physics. Why is something weightless, for example? It's a fantastic excuse. I'm not talking about doing science. I'm talking about popularizing science, explaining physics, physical ideas to kids through the magic of space, because space is such a magical place. Things float, and there's fire and all those nice things that kids love. Well, this is me in 1963. I won a TV. Anyway, this was a TV show. I won a prize that they sent me to Moscow to meet the then current cosmonaut rather, Pavel Popovich, and that's a signed postcard from Pavel Popovich that was given to me in 1963, and I treasured it ever since. And we'll return to that one. So the first question everybody asks is, how does one start a trip to space? And basically, you go to don't laugh, but you go to the travel office, and you find out about trips. You find out about trips to the launch site. So visit the launch site first. Go there and see what's going on. That's how the whole thing happened. I didn't want to go to space, but I wanted to go to the launch site in Baikonur and witness a space shot, a Russian space shot. I've seen a number of unmanned and manned space shots in the States, of course, but this was in Russia, and it's you can do it. So here is how it looks, and these are my pictures. I'm standing here. And look what I'm like this close to the three astronauts. These are one, Andrei Kuiper is a Dutch astronaut, one of them, and Gennady Podolka, and an American astronaut on the third place. They are declaring, now I know what's going on exactly. They are on their assigned spots, and they are declaring their readiness to the chairman of the State Commission. So this is the chairman of the State Commission. They are declaring their readiness, and then they get on the bus and go on. So this is not a very good picture, but it does illustrate something very, very important. As you notice, the surface on the right, can you see that it looks like snow, right? Well, that's the skin of the rocket. Okay? And the reason that it looks like snow is because the rocket is fully fueled. So this is a picture that I took with this camera. And you can see that, I mean, I was about 10 feet away, and we were partying around the fully fueled rocket. That impressed me a lot, you know, because to me, it means that it's not dangerous. Because if everybody tells you to stand, you know, the further they tell you to stand, the more dangerous the thing is. So the fact that you could be this close, and we'll see other examples of that, not only me standing very close, but people that are more important than me are also standing close. So this is now ready to fire. So of course we are not 10 feet away anymore. Common sense says that, but we are still very close. And then of course it goes and makes big noise. So I was very impressed, and of course I was approached by the people who organize these tours. They also organize space tours. I met Greg Olson. I don't think Greg is here, but Greg Olson lives here in Princeton. And I met him, and he was readying for his space flight. He was the third space tourist. And this idea started to kind of gain currency, that what they suggested that maybe I should fly too. And I said, no, I'm not sure. So we went step by step. And let's do all the medical tests in the US. Let's see if the centrifuge works out. So this was a centrifuge in England, just to see what it's like. It's different than airplanes because the G's go this direction rather than this direction as in an airplane. So I was used to the airplane G's, but I've heard that the G's are much higher, and I was afraid of them. They are indeed much higher, but they are in a different direction, and they are easier to take. So, and I learned it on this centrifuge. It's a very interesting device. It's very British. It's old. It was built in 1955. And if you notice, they didn't bother to get all the wires, you know, all the sensor wires that comes from your body and other things outside of this rotating equipment. They simply put the ductor into the middle. The ductor station is in the middle of the centrifuge. So the doctor gets up to, and he's kind of rotating happily. And of course, he doesn't get the G's because he's closer to the rotation, and it doesn't rotate that fast, because the arm is long. Again, physics. But we are not doing that. I must have met about 50 doctors, and I got the most thorough checkout that you can imagine. They gave me lots of tests that usually don't give to healthy people. So that's kind of an extra plus if you want to look at it that way. Here, for example, it's a sensitive microphone that is listening to the arteries that the blood makes in the arteries, and by that they can find out if there are any arteries that might be close to being blocked. And to make sure that my eyes weren't completely destroyed by the previous test, now they are testing my eyes. And it goes on like this, and these are the final commission, the Russian doctors. They shake my hand, and they're going to recommend that I am okay. And after that, I had about 10 minutes to decide if this is Eric Anderson. He is the person who created the market for these taxi seats. And he's a total visionary, and he bought the seats from the Russians for resale to clients in the future. He established a price for taxi seats, and now governments are bidding for it. For example, the Malaysian government has just flown an astronaut, and we'll see him in a few minutes. I was planning to fly next year, 2008, but he told me that no, you must fly in 2007 because of all kinds of geopolitical problems, and I had 10 minutes to decide, and I looked at the people waiting in the queue, and I said, I got to go. Now, we shook hands. There was no guarantee that I would be going, and in fact, this picture, I am standing next to Daisuke Yamamoto, who has been training at that time to be the next tourist. This was 06 August. So he was training to fly in September. He was disqualified and was not flown. And instead of him, Anusha Ansari, who is in the middle, she was the backup, and she got to fly. So there are never any guarantees. I just passed my medical, and so I'm still okay. So when you get to the medical, that gives you the next step is to go into training, and the training takes place at CPK, otherwise known as Star City. It's near Moscow, and it has to do 3 basic parts: Russian language training. Why do you learn Russian? The official language on the Soyuz spacecraft is Russian. The official language on the space station is English. My crewmates spoke very good English, so it wasn't really 100% necessary to speak Russian. But of course, all the systems, all the documentation, panels are all in Russian, and if you really wanted to follow what's going on, Russian, plus I looked at it also as a plus. It was a very, very, very good training, because physical training and then the simulation and the technical details. This is Star City. It was built in the 60s in socialist realist style. It's very, very modest. When you look inside those buildings, they look good they look clean enough, but inside the corridors are dark. Many of the light bulbs or light fixtures are missing. If you go to the toilets, you often find technical drawings that have been torn up into pieces, if you are lucky. Now, toward the end of the training, we started to see real toilet paper and I said the check must have arrived to myself. I'm not joking. So this is learning Russian. Russian language is beautiful, but very, very complex. So the other interesting thing is I'm wearing a scarf. Why? Because it's very cold in the classroom. We discussed, there's a personal trainer. This is my trainer, Slava, and that was, again, wonderful to do that. I was in the best shape in the last 15, 20 years, I think. This is a classroom of the technical details. It's typically one-on-one and with an interpreter, and then you see the training aids. The training aids are must be maybe as much as 30 years old. The system is a very old system. It's been flown since the 1960s. So for example, this is a parachute system, the main parachute system essentially unchanged since the beginning. Very, very reliable, very interesting, very sophisticated. This is another training aid, the life support system, KSOJ. And as you see, all the logic, those symbols that you see at the bottom, the switches are AND gates and the diodes are OR gates. And from this, you should be able to basically read out the logic of the life support system, all the pressurization and how the pressurization changes in orbit and on re-entry and so on and so forth. So it's very direct. It's very transparent. These are not black boxes, and it's fascinating. Yeah. One of the first things that you do just in the practical realm is you get a cast, a plaster of Paris cast of your body, from which a seat liner will be built. And the seat liner will protect you from the impact with the ground. And will also be comfortable during acceleration. But mostly it's the impact with the ground that they are worried about. So you get your own seat liner, it has your name on it. When you move from one spacecraft to another, you are taking your seat liner with you. This is my first time with the spacesuit. Putting on a spacesuit is very interesting. It's basically there's a big hole, there's a tunnel in the belly of the spacesuit. So the helmet is behind my back at this point, and I just went through the tunnel, right? So the next step will be to pull the neck ring over my neck, And then this tunnel will be hanging in the front. I fold it carefully, gather it into what's called a sausage, and then I seal it with 2 rubber bands. These are surgical rubber, but they are rubber bands. Why are there 2 of them? In case one fails, thank you very much. Very direct, very reliable, and of course this material, this is latex, so it's kind of tacky to begin with, and when you fold it so much, it's a perfect seal. It's a vacuum seal, and we'll see it later with how we test it. Now we get into the real. This is not the 1955 British. This is the world's biggest centrifuge, the CX-18 or whatever. 18 meters is the arm. You can see the scale by. There's a TV, an old-fashioned TV set on the table there. So it's very big. I'm rotating there. I'm being watched. Now this is something I recommend if you're interested in what weightlessness is, or what space sickness is like. Because 50% of people experience this thing called the space adaptation syndrome, or space sickness, and it's very much like nausea and basically for 2 days you cannot function very well. People want to avoid. There's no good predictor of who will get it, who won't get it. The Russians believe that they can train for it. I did everything that they told me and I didn't get sick. I don't know what that means, but it's one more data point in their graphs. So the way you train for it is this thing called a vestibular chair. And you can do it yourself. You take a rotating office chair. You don't have to rotate very fast. It's about this speed. So, okay. I thought there was a line here. So ask your colleague to turn you. You have to have your eyes closed. But the most important thing is that you have to go back and forth with your head. And that will create Coriolis forces in your inner ear and will give you the strangest sensations. It's not super bad. So don't worry about it. You're not going to throw up unless you do it for a given period of time. The day before launch, I did it for 30 minutes. And we only stopped because the previous day I did it for 12 minutes. We never wanted to push it where you get sick because we didn't want to associate the feeling. And the interesting thing is that when I got to space, and we'll see what that's like, I got those same feelings from early on, from weightlessness. And of course, I shrugged them off saying, oh, yeah, it's not pleasant, but I know it, it's okay. So it's good training. Okay, this is for just practicing the flare. We'll see it in a minute. Not everybody knows, but the spacecraft carries a gun. It's right in front of me. It has 3 barrels, 2 shotguns, and 1 rifle barrel. And the machete is its butt. Now, the machete is very, very important because that's the only tool you have to cut down trees. And trees are... So we'll see it. This is me in the simulator. We'll return to this later. You can see that the spacecraft is very Spartan. At least the simulator is very Spartan. We'll see the spacecraft. Training, you've seen the parabolic flights. This is, again, something that is available here in the US. You can go to Florida, and you go to nogravity.com and check it out. It's a very interesting experience. Stephen Hawking did this flight earlier this year, and he enjoyed it very much. Now, this is, of course, a much larger aircraft, and here we are practicing with a 50-kilogram weight, so it's about 100 pounds. And what you're really learning is that just because something is weightless, it doesn't mean it doesn't have inertia. So it does resist movement, and it's not an easy task to pass this weightless but massive object to somebody else. And of course, our legs are always anchored someplace. Otherwise, we would be pushed back as we were trying to move it. Oops, pushing the wrong button. Sorry about that. What do I do now? Whatever. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Okay, here we go. More training. We were trying to put on the spacesuit. It was very difficult. In space, it was very easy. Training was much more difficult than the flight in general, and this is one example. trying out all the food. It's actually not that bad. But these are the cans, and these cans go directly into the heater, and then you heat them up. We practice the heating, and this is the dessert, excellent. Just to show this is a dinner at Star City, and around the table we have these are just male cosmonauts, but it's a Russian, a Belgian, American, Malaysian, Japanese, and myself, American, and one more American. So why are there so many Americans here? The answer is that anybody who is on the space station has to have Soyuz training, because in case of a fire or depressurization, the Soyuz is the only lifeboat that people can use from the space station. So many of these people, some of these people actually go up on a Soyuz because there's extra capacity there, and otherwise they might go up on the shuttle, but they stay on the space station. The moment the shuttle departs, they have to have the Soyuz training. In fact, they take up 2 spacesuits with them and the seat liner, the suit for the space shuttle and the suit for the lifeboat. And here you see Sheikh Musaffar on the right, who just flew and just returned a couple of days ago. If you followed the news, there was not much news here. He is the first Malaysian and in space, and simply the government got one of these taxi seats. In fact, they bought a lot of fighters from Russia, and then Russia threw in a taxi seat as a sweetener. But that's fine. Okay, they could have afforded it, I guess. But what's interesting is that Malaysia decided to run a competition among the population, and they said everybody between ages 16 and 70 was eligible. But then they quickly whittled down to this very nice guy, bodybuilder and male model. So yeah, very well spoken. This is me practicing with the toilet. That's the toilet this is the toilet in the space station. You might ask questions later about it. This is the backup toilet for the Soyuz. And that's also a fairly complex system, works very well. This is my first time, after all that, a couple of months we've been practicing and studying and visited Energia, and this is the real spacecraft. This is spacecraft number 220. This is the one I'm going to fly up on. And this is the one that just returned, again, a few days ago, because it stayed up for 6 months. I returned on a different spacecraft that was up for 6 months when I went up. But it's an amazing experience when you see the hardware that you are going to fly. This is me with the crew inside, without the spacesuits. This is called the fit check. And they want to see if we fit, because it's very, very tight, as you can see. This is the lower part of the spacecraft that will return. There's a higher part that is called the living room that is larger, but it's only used during orbit. This is our control panel right in front of us. Now, here I'm ready with 2 other for our survival training. The Russians don't believe in emergency landings. They say landing in unplanned landings, because they can land anywhere. And again, if there's a fire or depressurization, urgent landing, you might wind up anywhere on Earth, and including climatic conditions that are difficult. So they give us this survival training. And what they do is we have to put on the spacesuits. We get into the spacecraft that is right in the woods, and then we have to survive for 2 days. Survival starts by taking off the spacesuit inside the spacecraft, inside the tiny, tiny, tiny room. Very, very difficult. In fact, it was so difficult that the commander of this particular mission, who stands in the middle, couldn't do it. And well, anyway, this is built a wonderful teepee. I think it's the best teepee that has ever been built during such an exercise. It's made out of parachute nylon and using the machete and one knife. That's all we have. Weight is at a great premium, so you have survival equipment, but absolutely minimal. And you're supposed to use the other material, for example, the 10,000 square feet of parachute material to build, for example, a shelter. And we learned about 3 different kinds of shelters for different climatic conditions and so on. But of course, this is our bed where we slept for 2 days. And we had to create a signal fire, again, quite difficult because everything was so wet. And it had to work on, they reported that the helicopter is around, so please signal your position. And so we do the signal fire. And then finally, we used the only flare we had. And so this is me with the flare. This is here. I was happy to just practicing, but reality is a little bit, after 2 days of being in the woods, it was more difficult. We were furnished with these corsets that we are using on return that prevent the blood from pooling in the legs. It's kind of interesting. When you go to space, blood goes into your head, and your head feels full. When you come back to Earth, you have already accommodated to space. Now all the blood is pooling in your legs. So this prevents that. It's not against G's. People think that it's against G's. It's against G's, but it's against the 1G that's on Earth. And you wear it for about 3 or 4 days after return. This is the trial for the spacesuit after it has been tied off with the 2 rubber bands inside the chamber at 33 kilometers, so over 100,000 feet of altitude. Practically vacuum. You spend 2 hours motionless. The spacesuit is rigid because of the pressure inside, the normal pressure inside, but zero pressure outside. And it builds a lot of confidence. The practicing for fire, you have to wear a regenerative mask while you are escaping the fire, and then you have to put on a spacesuit while you are wearing the mask. This is one of the worst exercises. This is Clayton Anderson, who is up there right now, practicing on the mock-up of the Russian segment. Again, they have a better mock-up of the Russian part of the space station, so long-term American astronauts trained with us. Some of the pictures that we will see from orbit were given to me by Clay, wonderful guy. So this is the official picture. I'm ready to go. Now we are in quarantine. We are separated from the world and just surrounded by a few nurses that are also in quarantine. It's not only that we don't get sick, but we don't take anything to the station and make them sick. That would be a real problem. And we are practicing for weightlessness, and this is one of the practices. You can also do that if you put a 2x4 under your bed on the leg side, and you are at a slight angle, and that's how we were sleeping. Again, blood goes to your head, and that's a little bit how weightlessness feels. Few days before launch, maybe 3 days before the launch, meeting the rocket, that this is our rocket, surrounded by people, tourists, whatever. We were separated because we were in quarantine, but so we couldn't talk to them. But it was interesting. It still wasn't completed. It's completed about the last day. When it's completed, it's pulled by a train to the launch pad. People stand around and put pennies on the rail, and then they gave me one of the pennies that are flattened by the car with the rocket that is taking me. That's one of the nice superstitions. The breakfast, the day of launch, Saturday, steak and eggs. It's called a low residue diet. So, if you know what I mean, you have to sign your door at the hotel. Again, the hotel was completely ours. The 3 crew plus the support staff that were in quarantine. Salute. Everybody gets very serious. wear masks, 2 hours before launch. And this is we declared our readiness about 3 times, and this was the last one. But I just want to introduce some of the other people on the background. That's the rocket, and it's fully fueled. We're just going to go up there and be launched. But the people, Mr. Permitov is the head of the Russian Space Agency, equivalent of NASA. Mr. Ivanov is kind of Putin's. It's kind of called it the vice president. And Mr. Sevastianov, who is holding me by the arm, he is the head of Energia, which is the equivalent of Martin Lockheed. So these people, the leaders of the largest aerospace corporation, close to being the head of the government and the head of the space agency, they are all standing there with you next to the rocket, and everything is going exactly on the schedule on the second. This is where we say our goodbyes. You've seen that, waving. A couple of interesting things here. At the bottom of the stairs, Mr. Sevastianov was standing there, and as we passed by, he kicked us firmly in the behind. And that's one of the traditions. It probably comes from the time of Korolev, when maybe somebody was a little bit reluctant to go, and Korolev gave him a firm kick. And ever since, the chief designer, who is also the head of the corporation, which is also an interesting kind of combination, so is standing there and kicks everybody in the behind. I was warned that this will happen. Otherwise, you are kind of bent over anyway. The cut of the spacesuit is very awkward. You might have noticed. I think it's like a penguin with a diaper, but from the side. But so you're kind of walking like this, and you're carrying that air conditioning unit. So if somebody were to kick you unexpectedly, you could fall on your nose. It's very bad. But we were warned, but I didn't expect how firm it was. Yeah, I'm also wearing the watch that is outside there. That's a Swiss watch. It's completely mechanical, and it's kind of a gift. It's not very useful, and it's kind of a gift to the astronauts. We can keep it afterwards. And it has to be wound, but there was no checklist that it has to be wound. So after launch, I pushed the stopwatch because I wanted to follow the timing. The real clock was a little bit too far for my eyesight, and it stopped after 7 seconds, just like in the movies. So here's our launch. It was a night launch. I was told it's beautiful. You are inside the spacecraft. You don't see anything. People think that it's very violent or very loud. It isn't. It's very much like taking off in a helicopter or in an elevator, in a fast elevator. You feel that you are being lifted. The noise is not much. You are separated from the noise by the outer layer, called the launch shroud, and then the spacecraft skin, your helmet, and then inside the helmet, the headphone. So it's a very quiet time. Lots of things are happening, and you're not quite sure which one is the real launch. I mean, it's just, again, just like a takeoff in a helicopter. This is the first picture in space, again, took with this camera. This was kept in the living compartment, so it took quite a while before everything got checked and opened up. We got the camera down, took this picture. Remember, this was the picture in the simulator, so you can see reality is very close to simulation. The pencil is floating. Remember, this is the pencil that, actually it's an American pencil. It's a Faber-Castell. Well, maybe that's German. Anyway, it's a normal mechanical pencil. And also notice that there is a screen on the window. It's the reason that there's a screen, because looking outside can make you sick. The space sickness. So we were really told not to do it until we really got used to it. And how are we doing in time? Everybody? Yeah, okay, great. I have I'll do that at the end. But the spacecraft is actually rotating to keep its orientation toward the sun. It rotates once every 3 minutes. So you're not only going around the Earth, but you're also rotating. So the Earth has this very strange path outside of your window. It feels like you are rolling on a giant wheel that rolls on the surface of the Earth. So sometimes you feel you are diving, and then you feel you're going up like in an acrobatic airplane. We'll see that. This is my first glimpse of the Earth. It's beautiful, it's blue. It's very much like the sky. You know, people think that it's small. It might be very small from lunar orbit, but when you're low Earth orbit, it's giant. It's bigger than from here, because how much do you see? You don't see that much. You see a lot of sky. There you see the blue is the sky. I'm sorry, the blue is the Earth. This is looking up at the living compartment from below. So you see it's quite spacious. Again, it's very Spartan. Here I am taking a cat nap in the spacecraft on the ceiling, wearing these wonderful fur boots, and it's very, very relaxing. This is my fellow cosmonaut, Fyodor Yorchikin, and he's playing with apple juice. So that sphere was squeezed out from that apple juice container. And there's no problem because when we took the picture, then he goes and simply sucks it out of the air, and touches it with his lips, and it goes in. It's nice. Now this was probably the most magic moment. After 2 days, it took 2 days to rendezvous with 8 minutes to go to orbit, and then 2 days to catch up with the space station. And during those 2 days, you were alone, and you didn't see anything that, by at least with the naked eye, you didn't see anything man-made. And then you get near to this thing. And of course, we are coming sideways, so this is the glimpse that we got. We didn't get a glimpse of the whole thing, the whole space station, which is quite big. It's about 140 feet long, and it's about 240 feet at the extent of all the solar arrays. And we arrived at sunset, local sunset. That's how it was calculated. And the colors at sunset are incredible. It's very theatrical. That's how I described it in my blog. It's being in a modern opera, because the colors are unusual, the structures are completely unusual. These are structures that you can't see on Earth because they couldn't support themselves. They seem a little bit flimsy, and then the colors change tremendously. The shadows are very, very sharp, and just like in a theater. So we arrived, we had a news conference, 3 people were waiting for us. Sonny Williams, of course, is there. This is a view from inside the space station looking at our spacecraft that just docked. As you see, it's like a pilot fish and a shark, just hanging below the main fuselage of the space station. The space station is essentially 3 school buses, one after the other, which is in this direction in this picture. Here's a sunrise. And here's how the colors change on sunrise. This is one moment, and the next moment is like that. Okay. Here you see Manhattan. Looking down, Central Park, of course. So you think that, oh, well, it must be very exciting. You see all these wonderful things. This is not what you see. This is what you see. That's what you see in your telephoto lens. So unless you recognize Long Island and you know the area, there's no way that you would know what's going on. This is an impact crater in Quebec. This is just the right time of the year. It's outlined by the. And we are talking about. Remember how small Manhattan was. Now this is the same. This is the same view. Yes.
You guys ask questions. What cameras are you using for these pictures now?
This is a Nikon, but different lenses. Yeah. Of course, regular digital camera, Nikon D2. And this would be a 50 millimeter lens, and the previous was probably 400 or 800. Lots of irrigation everywhere, but it looks a little bit like from an airplane, doesn't it? This is Seattle. It's important for me, just the frozen lake. Okay, this is the pyramids. The shadow plays a few games with it, but then it's a little bit also magnified, but you can recognize it's pyramids. Niagara Falls, right? Niagara Falls. This is one of the atolls in Pacific. I think that nature is a very fractal thing, that things on the big look the same as things in the small, except the scale is different. I mean, this could be a kind of a sea animal, and it's kind of floating, and it changes its shape as you are flying over it. Many times you see things from sideways, and that really distorts the image that you have in your mind. This is Easter Island. I'm really trying to find the more sculptures there, and I'm sure they are there. Bahamas, Dubai. So this is me doing science, doing measurements of radiation, and you see one of the radiation detectors outside. As you see, it's not an easy task. Everything floats away. Everything has to be Velcroed down. And so everything has Velcro on it. The floor has what the Russians call Mama Velcro, and the other things have Papa Velcro. So and do the measurements, make notes. This is what the space station is like from the inside. It's a little bit messy. This is the Russian segment, lots of computers. It looks like a New York camera shop, doesn't it? This is a container of water. This is how water looks. It's liquid water. It just has air bubbles inside of it. And that's a container of water. Water is very important. It's used also to generate oxygen. It's a very efficient way for some reasons to store oxygen. Here I'm demonstrating what yogi is always trying to do, levitation. Notice, by the way, the icons and the little religious artifacts. There's an Orthodox cross, too, in a Russian segment. You can do all kinds of exercises that you couldn't do on Earth. This is Michael Churin, and he has been staying 6 months. This is the 6th month on the space station, and usually you don't wash your clothes, but you replace them. And he refused to replace his clothes, and he was just mending it for 6 months. So this is how it looks after 6 months. Here is Mike replacing the toilet. When the toilet is full, the whole thing is well, actually the seat is kept, but the rest of the container with the solid waste is then sealed and will be returned on the returning spacecraft to burn up in the atmosphere. But another interesting touch, you have to change it about every 2 days with 6 people on board. The another interesting thing is this kitschy painting that's on the wall. You know, who brought it there? I don't know. But it's very, very homey. Oh yeah, this is the same toilet and during practice. You see the container and the seat assembly. I started a library in space. This is Ex Libris ISS. Let's see how long that will last. I took Goethe's Faust with a very nice English translation. And it's important to do fun stuff. So the Russians gave me this certificate. It's signed by Michael Churin and Fyodor Yurchikhin. And it's certificate number 1, stamped on the station. As you see, I think that it's important that wherever humans go, they should do what they usually do. So. And in fact, this is Sonny Williams just finishing the Boston Marathon. She ran the marathon at the same time as people did in Boston, and there's her time, and you see the distance. Gosh, anyway, it says 26. The screen cut it off. In my screen, it says 26. On the left, you see it says 6.2 miles. It's 26.2 miles. Sorry about that. It says it right here. It's the projector. This was a very touching ceremony, the change of command. The commander was Michael Lopez Alegria in the middle, who is a U.S. Navy, and the new commander is Fyodor Yurchikhin, the Russian cosmonaut who was replacing him. And so the whole ceremony was performed. Notice the ship's bells above Sonny's head. And the bell was struck and at the right time, and I was privileged to be the photographer for the event. Here we are ready to come back. The interesting point here is just that the book is floating in the air, and you can just turn the pages. It's a checklist. It's a return checklist. I still have it. Now we are putting on the corsets for real. Again, it's very easy to do. You just float up to somebody, and then they help you. Everything is so much easier. These things are easy. Of course, doing work is very difficult. You put something down, you will never see it again for a week, and then you find it at the air filter. Landing. You have seen this picture. They were rolling us. The reason that they were rolling us, they wanted us head down because that's the easiest way to pull us out with our face down. So how do they do that? Oh, by the way, another thing about it is look at the divot that we made in the ground. That's the impact of the ground. We do about 25 miles an hour vertically when we hit. So it's like 25 miles an hour car hits a brick wall. There are this thing called the soft landing rockets that fire at the altitude of 80 centimeters. It's about this much. The firing is done with a gamma ray altimeter, which works on the principle of gamma ray backscatter. So there is a strong radioactive substance on the rear of the spacecraft. You don't want to go there. In fact, very soon, the next thing they're going to do is put a tape around the backside because of the intensive radiation from the bottom of the spacecraft.
You mentioned that you took survival training.
Yes.
You landed off course. Obviously, no one would be there to roll the thing.
Yes.
For a position, but there must be some way to blow the hatch internally.
Oh yeah, it's just convenience that you are head down. That's the easiest way to get out. Yes, in fact, you don't blow it, you just pull it. It opens inward, as a matter of fact. Here's the hatch. This is the outside of what used to be the outside of the hatch. It's not burned very much. And it's inwards. It's covering up the screen that I've been showing earlier. So I'm a happy camper. They pull us out. All these three people are all MDs. So it's like being born again, I think, in some ways. And so remember this picture? Well, Pavel Popovich today is the senior surviving cosmonaut. And here he is. And there was a great reunion. He called me Charlie, and everybody was very surprised that how come I know the most senior cosmonaut. So it was all's well that ends well. Over 40 million hits in charlesinSpace.com. But thank you very much. Thank you. So now for the questions. And I think we have, yes?
What's your opinion of Virgin Galactic, the commercial enterprise that's supposed to take place in the next few years?
Yes. Well, we are talking about suborbital flights, and I've seen the X Prize, the suborbital flights. I think they have a lot of work to do to make it reliable. If it's made reliable and it's demonstrated that it's reliable, remember that this system is 40 years old, and it has the resources of two states behind it, mostly the Soviet state, but also the Russian state. And so they are doing something that is of course, will last 15 minutes instead of 14 days, but it will be very exciting. I think that if it works, people will want to do it, I'm sure. It's certainly quite a bit more than what you can do today on the parabolic flights, where you get maybe 20 seconds, not very clean, microgravity, and you get it 10 times. So here you get 15 minutes of very clean microgravity, and of course you see the Earth and you see the roundness, and I think it will be good. Yes, ma'am. Well, I said it's great to be back, and it was a beautiful day, and I've got this apple, and you start enjoying the simple things. Beautiful weather in Kazakhstan, very, very happy, very, very happy. But it wasn't like, oh, finally it's behind me. I mean, I really missed, during the last day, I was really sad that I got used to space, and I, for a long time, and maybe never, I won't experience it again. Yes, Elaine.
It was the question, when you want to do it again, and to do it again, what changes do you want?
Oh, yes. I would like to do it very much, and there's an opportunity to do that. It would be a very difficult decision. It's one problem I had is how come that some people fly 5 or 8 times, and other when there are so many applicants. It's very interesting, both in the U.S. and among the U.S. and American astronauts. Russian and US astronauts, there are people who fly many, many times. Turns out that experience counts for a lot, and you lose a lot of time in your experiencing space just by getting used to it. And with my 14 days, I'm considered a pretty experienced person just with respect to the space adaptation and how to work and how to move around. And it would be wonderful to be able to use those skills at some point. Of course, I'm not getting any younger. One thing I would change, I would do, and I recommended that, would do a much better job in documentation, taking, for example, remote controls and very special tripods with me. We were counting on helping each other for picture taking, and that was completely impossible. I didn't realize how busy those cosmonauts and the crew are. So being really self-sufficient and not dependent on the incredibly busy crew. I mean, just normal life is actually quite time-consuming. Just preparing a meal, for example, is very time-consuming. Not because it takes time to heat it, but just disposing the garbage, piece by piece, and each act of disposition is an act of opening something up, protecting what's inside, putting the new thing in, resealing it, fixing the garbage container, and so on and so forth. So that's what I would do. Yes, sir?
Did you keep the specially molded seat that you got?
That's a great question. I certainly had a contract to keep the spacesuit, and I haven't got it yet. There's a lot of export paperwork that they have to do. So, and I understood the contract to mean all the personal equipment, everything that has my name on it, that includes the spacesuit, the molded seat, and the some survival suits. I'm not sure if they're going to give it to me. But of course, it's not good for anybody else. But maybe they just raised the price, I don't know. So we are a little bit arguing about it. First, I'd like to have the spacesuit, and then we can go on. Follow up?
What do you plan to do with it?
I plan to loan it to museums. And for the spacesuit, every couple of years, I will try it on, see if it fits. Yes, sir. It wasn't that bad at all. There's several things. First of all, you get very dizzy. You have this thing called the tilt translation. When you move your head, you feel like your whole body is moving at high speed back and forth. That disappears after about 3 hours. But you will see that returning astronauts often hold their heads very stiff. They don't move it. The second problem is called orthostatic tolerance. This is the blood going into your feet, and then you get dizzy and lose consciousness because of lack of blood in your head. And that takes about 3 or 4 days. We did a lot of, it took us into rehab. Again, we were in isolation, not to get sick, and then we did a lot of swimming. Swimming is a fantastic exercise. You can't fall over, basically. And so The doctors said that the rule of thumb, or at least the conservative rule of thumb, is one. Let's see, what was it? 1 day, 1 month. Now I forgot what the rule of thumb was. But for one, yeah, okay. No, I forgot what the rule of thumb was. Sorry, I'll think of it later. Yes, sir.
So I noticed in the pictures when they took you out, people were sort of carrying you around and
Yes.
stuck in chairs immediately.
Yes.
Were you sort of not able to really stand up? And was that because of weakness or because of balance?
Yeah, it's both, and there was a big difference between the 6-month people and the short-term people, and they don't want to distinguish much. We could get confused or whatever, so they treat everybody very nice. But the 6-month people were very sick. They were, despite of the fact that they exercised very, very hard before return. And a lot of time was allocated for exercise, 2 hours a day. Again, considering how busy they are, it's a lot of time. But they were quite sick, and it's a combination of the two. By the way, it's a special Russian thing. We let our astronauts fend for themselves. Sometimes they even drive home after return. But then every once in a while, one of them faints, and then it's news. How come an astronaut faints? It's the Russians are horrified of that. Yes.
I heard that sometimes astronauts grow a bit after they've been in space. Did that happen to you?
That's correct. You get about an inch and a half of height. Unfortunately, you lose it right after return. But it is an effect. In fact, when the seat liner is calculated with that height in mind, so they put a little piece of plastic in your seat just to accommodate that growth. But it's real. It has to do with your spine elongating. I mean, it's nothing is compressing it anymore. So it's yes.
You promised to tell us what they do all day.
Well, it's for example the exercise, and again the simplest tasks take much longer. So housekeeping takes a lot of time, and then they have a very strict schedule of experiments, and I volunteered for experiments, and they kept me incredibly busy.
What kind of, except for the radiation measurement?
Yeah. For example, there were the radiation measurement. I had to do a very detailed back pain questionnaire because people do get back pains, and they don't know why and under what conditions and what to do about it. So I had to have a detailed notes about that. And then there was a sampling experiment of biological sampling around the space station. There were specific places I had to go and sample the place and take the swabs and store them correctly for returning to Earth. There were a lot of public affairs experiments where you get to use amateur radio and talk to schools and answer kids' questions. That's a lot of fun. Things of that sort. Yes?
Could you describe the sensation coming back into the Earth's atmosphere?
Yeah, that was very interesting. It was very much like skiing. It actually comes and generates a little bit of lift. It's a slightly lifting body, and by rolling the spacecraft, it can control the position and the distance of the landing spot within tens of miles. But that's how they get to a close to pinpoint landing, and the sound it makes is very much like the whooshing sound of skiing, and you go from side to side. It was quite interesting. The view through the window was amazing. First of all, you are flying much lower than in the orbit. You are 1/3 of the height, and you're still in space, but you are still going at the same speed. So the relative speed that things move under you is greatly increases. You are still really going like gangbusters, and then things start to turn pink, and then the pink disappears and you see fire, and then the window is a triple window, and the outside pane is designed to almost burn away, so it turns black. And you can see it kind of like a curly piece of paper in a fireplace, the window turning black from the bottom up. And we were in complete darkness until about 15,000 feet when the outer panes are pulled off by the jettisoning of the heat shield.
Are you able to hear both booms at all? Can you
No,
hear anything?
no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't feel any sonic booms. You feel the parachute openings. They are very. They are quite considerable. There are 3 parachute openings: a very small one, a medium one, and then the large one. And each one is a major jerk. And then you use your jerks to retighten your belts for the landing. The key thing for the landing is that all 6 belts be very, very tight. So every time it pulls you can't tighten up.
How long do you sleep, and do you sleep consistently?
Yes.
Timetable, or
Absolutely, we are. Yeah, we are made to sleep on a timetable, and they want us to sleep at the same time. We got 8 hours, and we got an hour before and an hour after for called pre-sleep and post-sleep. They are not enough, to do all the things you want to do. But the sleep is very, very pleasant. I had you have this. It's basically being in a bed with a lot of pillows, where the pillows are all around you. So you don't. The one problem is that you start. There's no down in space, of course, and there's no up. But in fact, it feels like every direction is a down. Namely, somehow your insides, you start feeling that your insides are pushing out, which you wouldn't feel here because typically you are overwhelmed by the feeling of gravity going one way. And sometimes I miss that notion that if I put my head on one side, then the other side would be very light. This side would be pushed, but the outside would be very light. You can't do that. No matter what you do with your head, it's always you always feel the pressure from inside. But it's okay. That was the stuff I missed a little bit. I've slept really well. Yes.
We've seen the pictures you take back toward the Earth. That all makes sense. Did you take any time, or what was your perspective looking the other way, into space or the moon?
Yeah. I've been asked by kids especially about the color of the stars, and I spent some time looking at the sky, and it wasn't very interesting. It's the difference is not that the difference in distance is nothing, of course, and so you're not any closer, and the windows are not particularly good. The good windows are oriented toward the Earth, so you use the poor windows to look at the sky. It looks like a very nice starry night if you get used to the darkness, but nothing special. Nothing special. Yes, sir.
Safety-wise, good question. One is, if you had an emergency landing, would you have been able to fend for yourselves, given what you described about the shape you were in? And on a more long term, how long do you think it will take before you can take untrained people in space?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. The first one is, look, I had the same notion. I mean, I went through the training, and of course we went in gung-ho, and in fact we had a psychological test just before we entered into the spacecraft, and in fact after 2 days we had to take the same test again, which was very interesting. But I remember that moment, and when I came with these 2 people that were up there for 6 months, and they were really weak. One of them was throwing up, and I said, wow, this would be being out there for 2 days. That would be really difficult. On the other hand, adrenaline kicks in. I don't think it would be I think that if anything, they would have felt better if they had something to do and they exerted themselves. Again, it's all precaution. In terms of the future, the biggest problem that you have in the spacecraft is the spacesuit. Most of the training, the claustrophobia or difficulties, it all centers around the spacesuit. And the spacesuit is only needed for this remote eventuality of the spacecraft losing pressurization. Why should it lose pressurization? Well, it did once in the Soviet program, and 3 people died. But it's like we are now flying without parachutes. In the beginning, it was very important to have parachutes and parachute training, but at some point, planes mature to the point where the wings don't fall off anymore. So we don't wear parachutes. We don't need parachute training to fly. And I think the same thing will happen, that the spacesuit is going to go, and that will remove a lot of the training requirements. Having more comfortable surroundings, simpler man-machine interface, and no spacesuit, I think will do a lot for just everybody getting involved. In terms of overloads, it's not that big a deal. It's 4 Gs in a comfortable position is not unpleasant at all. Now, the fact of the matter is that the spacecraft just came back, had to land in a backup mode called ballistic landing. So there was something wrong with that spacecraft, 220. We don't know what it is. But it came back, and the people who came back got 8 Gs instead of 4 Gs, like I did. Now, we trained for 8 Gs. Again, it's not the end of the world, but it's not as pleasant as 4. There's also a third backup mode called reserve backup landing, which is quite unpleasant. The Gs get higher, and you also rotate fairly fast. So you don't want to do that. Nobody has ever done that.
Charles, tell
Yes.
us about the gun and why it had 3 chambers. They really think that some of their crews were menaced by wolves, and the reason it has 3 chambers is that 2 are shotguns, like side by side. It's also the shotgun barrels are good for flare, for signal flares, and then the third one is a rifled barrel. So whatever you don't do with a shotgun, you can, I guess the wolves, you want the rifle. And it has a rifled, it's a short rifled barrel. It would be illegal in every state, that gun, being a sawed-off shotgun, essentially. Yes?
Looking back now, 6 months have gone by. What was the most memorable part of this? Was it looking down at Earth? Was it the training? What one memory?
I think that the arrival to the space station was the most memorable. I mean, if I had to take one out, but all of those things you mentioned, I mean, the training will stay with me just as much as the trip itself, and I think it's an integral part of the trip and the value that I got out of it. But if I had to pick one moment, it's the arrival to the station and being in the middle of this fantastic opera. Yes, ma'am.
Anything you can tell us about how it would be or has been different for women?
No, I mean, I wish I had flown with Peggy Whitson, who just flew on this mission. There are quite a few women are in training, and of course that are flying, and I think that it's a very egalitarian. Well, essentially the same. I mean, there's if you want to be very particular, there's an emergency urinating kit that is different for women, but that's about it. Otherwise the spacesuit is the spacesuit is exactly the same. It's the same part number. Yes.
It sounds that being up on that space station for 6 months would be extremely challenging. And I know they do careful psychological testing, but I wonder if they have had mental health emergencies and how they would deal with them.
That's a good point, and I was asking about that. Now it's the challenging part is really after return. The people were fantastic. Like 2 minutes before return, they were like giving reports and everything was fine. And then it's just after the return, it suddenly turned into this strange situation. I think that there are many psychological challenges in space, and in books you can read about past occurrences where where there was disagreement between the crew or some crew member behaved in an antisocial way. The Russians are very keen on psychological testing, and there's a psychologist that has been working there for 30 years, and he has his methods, and they claim to have, if nothing else, they have a lot of data. But they claim to understand very well the interpersonal relationships, and they select the crews based on the psychologist's recommendation. And as I was saying, and I want to emphasize that in the survival training, we had a test. The last thing we did in the house before we walked out into the woods was a psychological test. And the first thing we did, we went to the toilet, and then it was a psychological test, even before the other doctors got to us. We did the psych test, and it's quite detailed. It's like 30 minutes. So I don't know if it's mumbo jumbo or not, and I don't know how a Western doctor would evaluate it. I did have the tests in University of Texas medical branch also. They were somewhat different, but yeah, I'm sure that going to Mars will be a major psychological challenge.
Who gets the gun?
The commander, yeah. No, the gun is kit number 3, and the commander has the access to kit number 3. Yes. Well, who gets the morphine? That's the next question.
Stay with the medical. After your quarantine and everything, were there any inoculations or tablets you had to take? Nothing?
No. They offered, there was nothing that I had to take. They offered the Fendex, Phenergan and Dexedrine against space sickness, and I consulted with my doctor. I had my own doctor from the Texan, aeromedical specialist, and we decided that I'm not going to take that. And there was also there was another that was a diuretic that would reducing just the fluids in your body helps prevent, again, the accumulation of the fluids in your head, and that was supposed to help. Again, we decided that I would not take it, and it wasn't necessary, and it worked out great. Yes? Ma'am, in the middle. That's a great question, and yes, what happens in Earth is that people actually have these micro-sleep episodes where they fall asleep. For example, at the computer, you work at the computer, you fall asleep, and your head bobs. And the bobbing of the head creates a shot of adrenaline that wakes you up immediately. And so everything is fine, and it's completely unconscious. I mean, it's not, you're not conscious of doing that, but it has been observed. Now in space, your head doesn't bob. And in fact, you can, when people are tired, you can find your crewmate is asleep at the terminal. And you nudge them. And in fact, when my catnap was actually a catnap. I was really tired because we were just catching up with their sleep schedule. So we were really pushed around in time zones for a long time. And I was woken up in the middle of a dream, and I had a normal dream on Earth, something to do with preparing for spaceflight. And I woke up and I found myself orbiting the Earth in a spacecraft. So I thought that was the strangest thing, which one is the dream and which one was reality.
Well, I remind you that we are able to continue the discussion over reception in the Ford Hall Common Room, but now I'm sure we all want to thank Charles again for...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.